In the recent decades, with the help of DNA, the law enforcement has been able to solve numerous cold cases and help the family and friends of victims to get the closure they deserved. But still, with today's technology, thousands of cold cases are still unsolved. This video discusses 3 such cases which to this date remains unsolved. But before we start, we would like to send our sympathies to the loved ones of the 3 victims who fell victim to the obnoxious acts described in these cases. Terri Bevers, better known as Missy, was born on August 9, 1970 in Graham, Texas. Missy and her husband, Brandon Bevers, had 3 children together. Missy decided shortly after their first daughter was born that she would be a stay-at-home mom and leave her job working in special education. As their children grew older, Missy decided to start a career in fitness, where she would eventually become a well-known fitness instructor in Midlothian, Texas. Missy was described by many as a small-town girl who was a beacon of light to everyone she met, as well as being known to love helping others. Not everyone can give up their jobs, devote themselves to their family and household for years, and then make a successful career pivot, but that is exactly what Missy Beavers did. To most of her fitness clients and students, she was more than an instructor. She was a leader, an encourager, and the person who helped them believe in their ability to change their life for the better. Missy discovered this love of fitness as her girls got older and she had more time for working out and her own interests. She trained and studied and was in excellent shape by any standards, but particularly for a mother of 3 in her mid-40s. She was arguably in the best shape of her life. But her outward appearance is not what her husband, friends and broader community remember or speak about when they remember Missy. They point to her heart, her compassion, her ability to inspire and see the best in others. It's those traits that helped her during her years as teacher, then when she parented full-time, and now in her new career as a fitness instructor for a program called Camp Gladiator. Following her murder, husband, Brandon, was in awe of the outpouring of support from the Gladiator community. Countless people communicated their admiration for Missy, and their shock and devastation over her death. Family, friends, and her church and fitness communities struggled to comprehend how such a violent tragedy could befall one of the most loving souls they know. In the early morning hours of April 18, 2016, Missy Bevers left her home and arrived at Midlothian's Creekside Church of Christ just after 4 a.m. to lead an early morning fitness class which was scheduled to begin at 5 a.m. It was raining, but she had updated Facebook with a post stating, "If it's raining, we're still training, so class was on." Unbeknownst to Missy, an unknown person, wearing unofficial, tactical police riot gear, had already forced their way into the church prior to her arrival. Security cameras inside the church first see this person at 3:50 a.m. This unknown individual was seen by security footage roaming the dark halls of the church, and they appear to be searching for something or someone while breaking windows and going through offices in the building. One of her students arrived shortly after 5 a.m. and discovered Missy's body. The police were called immediately and the student reported that Missy was unresponsive and had puncture wounds to her chest and head. Police and EMS arrived at the scene and pronounced Missy dead. Police reported that Missy Bevers' cause of death was the multiple puncture wounds to her chest and head. Although Missy's official autopsy report was not released by investigators, police did explain to the public that her injuries were consistent with the hammer or an object that looks like a mallet that the suspect held as they walked through the church. Shortly after her murder, police released the surveillance video of the unknown assailant roaming the halls in an effort to bring in tips about this individual. The suspect's gender is not discernible. They are between 5'2" and 5'8", and walked with a limp as their feet pointed outward as they walked. A few days after Missy's murder, Missy's father-in-law, Randy Bevers, brought a blood-soaked shirt to a dry cleaner in Midlothian. He explained to the clerk that the blood was from his family dog who passed away when another dog attacked them. The blood on this shirt was later collected and tested by police, which was proven to be non-human blood. This caused the public to speculate as to whether or not the family was involved. However, Randy Bevers and his wife Vicky, as well as Missy's husband, Brandon, all have airtight alibis and were ruled out by investigators. There is a $50,000 reward for anyone who comes forward with information that leads to the arrest and grand jury indictment of the individual who murdered Missy Bevers. On June 27, 1995, Jody was scheduled to anchor the morning news at KIMT-TV, but when she didn't show up at 3 a.m., a producer for the station, Amy Kunz, called her to wake her up. Amy later told investigators that Jody had overslept, and that she explained that she would be there as soon as possible. Even though Jody lived only 5 minutes away from the station, Amy grew more worried as Jody missed her 6 a.m. newscast. Around 7 a.m., a coworker called the Mason City Police Department to request a welfare check be done on Jody. When police arrived shortly after, they immediately noted that Jody's new red Mazda Miata was still in the parking lot. Investigators also noted that many of Jody's personal items were scattered on the ground around her car. Once they entered Jody's apartment, they noted that nothing inside seemed out of the ordinary. Upon further investigation, police learned that neighbors from Jody's apartment complex heard a scream sometime around 4:30 a.m., as well as seeing a mid-1980s white Ford Ecoline van in the building's parking lot around that time. Police also learned that Jody had spent a short amount of time the night before her disappearance at a friend named John Vansis's home to watch a videotape from her birthday party earlier that month. Jody had reported to police around 9 months prior to her disappearance that she believed she was being stalked by a man in a white truck while out jogging. She also mentioned this to friends, and shared her concerns about leaving for work while it was dark. Jody had also been hoping to leave her job in Mason City, and try to get a job at a Twin Cities TV station, closer to her hometown. Since her disappearance, a nonprofit organization named Find Jody Inc. was created by TV journalists Josh Benson and Gary Peterson, in order to keep Jody's case in the spotlight. The organization erected 4 billboards in 2018 in an attempt to bring in more information regarding her disappearance. In January of 2020, one of their billboards was vandalized with the words, "Frank Stern's Machine Shed," written in yellow paint across the bottom of the billboard, mentioning a retired investigator in Jody's case. The Mason City police chief does not believe that this is a tip, but instead was written by someone with their own agenda. In 2001, Jody Sue Huizentrout was declared legally dead. Jody is described as being a 27-year-old Caucasian woman with blonde hair and brown eyes, who was 5 feet 4-5 feet 5 and weighed 110 to 115 pounds at the time of her disappearance. On the morning of September 12, 1977, 20-year-old Ann Harmeyer left her home in Cambridge City, to drive back to Indiana University's Bloomington campus, where she was a student deeply involved in the school's drama program. Ann did not arrive in class that day, and her mother grew concerned when she didn't receive an expected phone call from Ann that night. Ann's rust-colored Plymouth Lemons was discovered parked along in State Road 37 in Morgan County near Martinsville, locked, and with a dead battery. The emergency flashers had been on before the battery died, and later examination found the car's thermostat to be malfunctioning. Ann and her purse were missing. There don't appear to be any reports of signs of struggle in or around the vehicle. Extensive searches of the immediate area and a missing persons campaign throughout central and southern Indiana, even reaching the national news media, took place over the next several weeks, but to no avail. On October 18, 1977, a farmer beginning his harvest discovered Ann's remains in a cornfield roughly 4 miles from where her car was left. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled with a garrote made from her own clothing and personal belongings. Multiple suspects were considered, including IU students, area residents, and men later convicted of similar murders believed to have been in the area at the time. One of these was Stephen Judy, who was arrested and convicted for the murder of a Morgan County woman and her 3 children in 1979 and confessed to several others before his execution in 1980. Several of these women were also killed with a garrote improvised from their own personal items. However, Judy denied any involvement in Ann's murder, and law enforcement records indicate that he would have been incarcerated elsewhere at the time of her disappearance. Another was Jeffrey Hand, who, in 1980, was shot and killed by police in Howard County, while attempting to abduct a woman from her car. In 2019, Hand was linked by DNA to the 1972 murder of an Indiana State University student. It is unclear whether any DNA evidence has been or could be recovered from the existing evidence in Ann's case for comparison. Ann Harmeyer was an only child. Her father had died when she was 4, and her mother passed away in 1983. The memory of Ann's life and the injustice of her unsolved murder are kept alive by friends and family, who have occasionally clashed with authorities over the withholding of information concerning Ann's case. Indiana State Police have maintained that the investigation is active and could be jeopardized by prematurely releasing additional details. This week, in advance of the 44th anniversary of her disappearance, ISP issued an appeal for members of the public to come forward with any information about the case.